Hello, English Learner Portal community. I am back to continue our series on ideas for developing your English language development block and lesson sequences that can make your planning more balanced and faster, easier on you and on your students because it is predictable and just kind of plug and play as you go. In the fall and after the new year, we focused on lesson sequences that were kind of an arts integrated, language arts collaborative literacy approach. Those are my go to favorite. Any kind of if you need that step before reading intervention, if you need an enhancement to your tier one instruction, that collaborative literacy approach, those lesson sequences are my go-to small group instruction. Also work as whole group as well. If you miss that series, we'll put a link so you can get back to that as well. But today we're moving on to another type of lesson sequence, which I find to be, again, very successful, whole group or small group. We usually work whole group in the beginning and move it into small groups. And so for this type of lesson sequence, we work from read aloud to writer's workshop and combine those. So let's move to that part of our document here. When we move from read aloud to writer's workshop, so that's why it works whole group to small group. We can do our read aloud as a whole group, and then we can break it down into small groups for more individualized, differentiated instruction. So this type of lesson sequence starts in the beginning. Again, like in our last lesson sequence, the number of days it takes really depends on how you want it to work. It depends on how much time you have with students each day. It depends on how much time you have for a particular theme or topic to go on before you have to move on and switch gears to the next topic if you're keeping pace with content teachers. It also depends on how deep you want to go into the various pieces. So again, this is a sketch, an outline that you could follow, but the timing and the number of days is really up to you to figure out where your students need the most support and attention. In general, we tend to start on day one with the first read. We read through our read aloud. Students get frustrated. We actually had a student in the middle of one of our video model lessons stop and say, can't we just read the story and not ask questions? I was like, she's got a point. So now we make it a habit. So first read, we just read through and we enjoy the story. And we focus on oral language and comprehension. So we can combine our language arts outcomes with our English language development outcomes there. The focus on this day is the comprehension of the story, the big ideas, what we wanted, why we chose that read aloud in the first place, and to start practicing that oral language. Bringing in some frames, discussing vocabulary, getting them to start talking about whatever topic it is. And I'll give an example in just a minute. In day two, we roll into second read. So they've heard the whole story, they've heard the whole text. Now we're going to read it again and focus on our language arts standard. So if our language arts standard is talking about character traits or compare contrast, which is what we'll do in the lesson I'm going to share with you, then that's where we start bringing in the language arts standard. We start talking about that vocabulary, we decide where we want to go with it, and we focus our oral language around those topics. As we are discussing all of this, we're using our frames and sentence starters and vocabulary for oral language. It's a natural progression then to start moving that into some written language. So then we talk about how do we take the discussion we've been having and move it into writing? And we work on some written responses. We can create model text like we did in the other lesson sequences, depending on the level. We can come up with different supports for discourse. And then we wrap it up, either collaborative or independent writing, depending on where you want to go and the level of your students. If we do some collaborative writing first, and then let students free to do their independent writing where they can use our collaborative writing as a model. So I'm going to take you through just snapshots of what this looks like in the classroom without going into great detail into each of the lessons. Now, to be upfront and honest, this whole lesson sequence with much greater detail, how to plan it, using a planning guide, how to plan your language objectives, all of the classroom video is part of our Whole to Part Early Literacy for English Learners course. If you really wanted to go into depth, that's where all of the greater details are. This is just a skip through what this lesson sequence looks like. So let's take you into the classroom with our colleague Adriana. She is teaching the class, and we're starting there with the day one of the read aloud with some pre-reading language development. She selected a particular vocabulary word, and the whole point of this is to get them thinking about character traits, to get them talking, and to get them thinking about how to put their language together and have a conversation, because we'll need that moving forward.
You're going to be thinking today about how you can determine what her character trait is. A character trait. Have you heard of that word before?
Yes.
Character trait?
Yes.
What does that mean, character trait?
Character trait, the inside and the outside.
Good. A character trait is what a person is like, right? How can you tell what a person is like? Oh, you have it over there. Perfect. I see it. So you've looked at the character traits of Skippy Jones and the boy who cried wolf, and Gerald, and Piggy. Oh, this is awesome. So today we're going to think about the character trait for Grace. Right? So we're going to describe Grace. Okay? When you describe something, you tell about it. Right? So you're going to describe Grace by telling us what her character trait is. Okay? But then, so if you tell me that Grace is silly, that's her character trait, right? You describe her as silly, I'm going to tell you, prove it. And you're going to have to justify your answer. That's a good question. What is justify? Justify means to provide proof or evidence. And where do you think you're going to get that proof or that evidence from? Where did you get it for Skippy John Jones? In the book. Right. And where did you get it for Piggy?
In the book.
In the book. Right. Because the book tells us things that the character says, right? And it tells us things that the character does, right?
Once Adriana had established the outcomes for the lesson, generated some background knowledge, she was providing one example with the character trait of determined and using a Freire model to get students to explore that example. You can also see she is prepared with a sentence frame to help in our upgraded Think, Pair, Share that's coming up shortly. After practicing with Adriana's modeling, the students then turn and talk and use the sentence frame to share examples of a time they were determined and using the evidence of what they did and what they said. This will later connect to pulling evidence from the text. Adriana has a few students share their specific examples and their evidence as a model for others. The goal of that portion of the lesson is to start generating that background knowledge, to set the foundation, providing vocabulary and sentence frames and structures that students can use to continue to discuss our story as we move forward. As we move into part 2 of this lesson, which could be on the same day, could be a different day, you have to break it up how your schedule dictates in reality. The next part is the second read, and then focusing on the language arts outcome. So a couple clips from Adriana doing the second read and focusing on character traits and citing evidence. So the students are listening for that evidence to support their ideas.
She hid inside. Do you think that that is creative?
Yes.
Yes? So I could say Grace is creative.
And determined.
So how is Grace, what does Grace do that lets me know that she is creative? What is she doing? What do you think? Do you agree? Is she
Yeah.
creative?
Justifying.
How do you know that?
She's
Because
determined.
she's making up things, so
She's making up things.
In our after reading for the read aloud, we focus on helping the students to practice the language and structures they're going to need when we get to the writer's workshop. In writer's workshop, they are going to be stating an opinion. They are going to say, name a character trait, name a person, tell us a character trait, and then give us some evidence for that. And that'll look different depending on the groups of students, because we have from beginning proficiency up through pretty proficient students. So what their writing expectations are will vary. And that's why we then break them into small groups from there after we do some modeling. So we'll talk about the character from the book. We'll talk about Grace for our modeling, and we talk about how she is determined, and we come up with different structures and frames that students can use later in their writing as well. So being very purposeful in what we're practicing in oral language so they can directly apply it to their writing. As we move into the writer's workshop portion of the days, it really can be very flexible here depending on your time and the needs of the students. Some small groups need to be much more directed and much more hands-on and interactive with you and each other. Others can do this much more independently. So we always start with some pre-writing. Who do you want to write about? What kind of character traits do you think of when you think of that person? Why do you say that? And again, have all of that oral language first before we start putting that into writing, using the frames and structures to go. On the following days, I took over the instruction in various small groups by proficiency level. Here are some clips from the Writer's Workshop experience. Yesterday, we were talking about what story? Do you remember?
Yes. Grace.
Grace.
Amazing Grace.
Amazing Grace,
I'm gonna
right?
call her Awesome.
Awesome Grace, that would be another
wasn't
good title.
there.
There's also what? What was that word we talked about?
Integrity and determined.
Determined. She had integrity and she was determined.
Okay. I can
Identify
character traits
and justify. We're going to use this one. Justify
my opinion.
opinion. My opinion.
Yes, here.
Do you remember yesterday? Remember yesterday,
about those
Ms.
two
Brown
things.
was talking about justify, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
What is
Tell me
justify?
what you remember about justify.
Determined.
And she was determined, and we knew she was determined because we found things in the book that showed
Evidence.
us, right? Evidence, right.
Good job.
So justify is when you find evidence, right? I'm gonna have to turn this around here.
Proof is like you show people what it is.
Exactly,
And it
right?
proof it.
But so the first thing you're going to do is think about your first friend. So pick the one you're gonna put first.
B.
Okay, who are you going to do first?
Baby.
Jose, who are you going to do first?
Elena.
Who are you going to do first?
Valeria. Brianna.
Okay. The first thing you're going to do is think of a character trait that describes your person. Think about the inside outside like you did with Skippy John Jones and all of those. What's a character trait that would describe your person? And the pig. Right?
Anna is cute. I know this because she said she is cute and she did a split.
Action.
Jose R is nice. He helps people. He says, "Are you okay?"
One, action.
Judy, the Charmy, she pay and help and help.
One, action.
Judy is nice. She says, "Are you okay?" Andy said, she said, playing.
3, 2, 1, action.
Journalist is family.
3, 2, 1, action.
Justin is good outside.
Beautiful.
Here
Justin is happy.
happy.
Okay, now you say it.
Just him happy.
Okay, Ricardo said Justin is good in class. Do you want to read it? Go ahead. Mm-hmm. To you, please download the extra documents to help you recreate these kinds of lessons. And as always, let us know if you have any questions, or I'd love it if you try a lesson sequence like this and tell us which text you chose, which language arts focus, what language focus, and share some with us and let us know what you did. Have a great day.